Think you know the whole story? Turns out you were probably taught the half-truth. Welcome to Half-Truths. Close your eyes for a moment and picture a wolf pack. What do you see? I'm willing to bet it's a scene straight out of a nature documentary. A vast, snow-covered landscape, the wind howling. A line of powerful, gray figures moves through the trees, and at the front, head held high, scars etched into his muzzle, is the leader. The alpha. He's the biggest, the strongest, the most gunning. He eats first. He decides where the pack hunts. His rule is absolute, earned through brutal tooth-and-claw combat. Every other wolf in the pack knows its place, a rigid hierarchy descending from the alpha down to the lowly, submissive omega at the very bottom. This is the story of the wolf we all know. It's a story we learned in school, saw on television, and read in books. It's become a powerful metaphor in our own lives. We talk about the alpha male in the boardroom, the alpha dog on the sports team. The concept is baked into our culture as a fundamental law of nature, that power is taken by force, and leadership is a constant struggle for dominance. It's a clean, simple, and dramatic narrative. It speaks to something primal within us, this idea of a natural order built on strength. But what if I told you that story, that entire dramatic edifice of the alpha, the beta, and the omega, is built on a lie, not a malicious lie, but a profound misunderstanding, a half-truth born from a flawed experiment that has been echoing through our culture for over 75 years. What if the scientist who first popularized the idea of the alpha wolf spent the last decades of his life desperately trying to undo the myth he helped create? The story we've been told about the wolf pack isn't the whole story. And the truth, as it so often is not only more complex but infinitely more fascinating. Today, we're pulling the thread on the half-truth of the alpha wolf. The story we all know is incredibly compelling. It's a drama of Shakespearean proportions played out on the frozen tundra. At the center is the alpha pair, a male and a female who have fought their way to the top. They are the only ones in the pack who are allowed to breed. Their reign is a constant performance of power. They demand submission through ritualized displays of dominance, a direct stare, a raised tail, a low growl. The subordinate wolves, the betas, respond in kind, averting their eyes, tucking their tails and exposing their vulnerable necks in a gesture of surrender. In this telling, the pack is a cauldron of simmering ambition. Every beta wolf is just an alpha in waiting, looking for a moment of weakness, a chance to challenge the throne. The pack's social life is a relentless series of power plays, alliances, and betrayals. It's a high-stakes game where the losers are ostracized, sometimes violently, becoming the pack's scapegoat, the omega. The omega is the last to eat, the first to be the target of aggression, the living embodiment of failure within this brutal hierarchy. It's a tough life, but it serves a purpose. This constant competition, we're told, ensures that only the strongest, smartest, and toughest wolves get to pass on their genes. It's natural selection in its rawest form. This narrative is so powerful because it feels intuitive. It seems to explain so much, not just about wolves, but about the world. It gives us a simple framework for understanding social dynamics. We see it reflected everywhere. Dog trainers for decades built their methods around the idea of the owner establishing themselves as the alpha over their pet. Corporate leadership gurus write best-selling books about unleashing your inner alpha to dominate the competition. Online influencers build entire personalities around this supposed biological imperative for dominance. The alpha wolf isn't just an animal. It's an archetype. It's the ultimate symbol of rugged individualism and the relentless pursuit of power. And for a long time, it had the weight of science behind it. The term alpha was first applied to wolves in a 1947 study by a Swiss animal behaviorist named Rudolf Schenkel. He published a paper called Expression Studies on Wolves, and it was here that the seeds of the myth were planted. Schenkel observed a group of wolves and meticulously documented their social interactions, their fights, and their rigid power structure. He described the constant battle for supremacy, coining the terms alpha male and alpha female to describe the dominant breeding pair. His work was influential, and the concept began to filter into the scientific community and eventually into the public consciousness. The alpha wolf was born. But there's a detail in Schenkel's research, a critical piece of context that almost never makes it into the pop culture version of the story. A detail so important that it changes everything. Schenkel wasn't studying wolves in the vast wilderness of the Yukon or the forests of Yellowstone. He was studying a pack of 10 unrelated wolves living together inside a 10 by 20 meter enclosure at the Zoological Institute of the University of Basel in Switzerland. He wasn't observing a natural wolf pack. He was observing a group of strangers in a cage. Imagine taking 10 random strangers from different countries who don't speak the same language and locking them in a small room together. You give them limited resources and tell them they have to live there for the rest of their lives. What kind of social structure do you think would emerge? Would it be a harmonious, cooperative family? Or would it be a tense, stressful, and often violent environment where the most aggressive individuals dominate the others out of sheer necessity? The behavior Schenkel observed wasn't the natural behavior of wolves. It was the behavior of stressed, traumatized, and deeply dysfunctional animals forced into an artificial and deeply unnatural social situation. It was less a family and more a prison yard. And the alpha behavior he saw was a coping mechanism for survival in a state of constant anxiety. For decades, however, this crucial context was lost. Other researchers replicated these findings by studying other groups of captive wolves, and the results were the same. A violent hierarchy always seemed to emerge. So the myth of the alpha became scientific fact. It was cemented in the public mind in 1970 with the publication of a book called The Wolf: The Ecology and Behavior of an Endangered Species. It was written by a young, brilliant biologist named L. David Meck. The book was a massive success, becoming the go-to resource on wolves for millions of people. And in it, Meck, drawing on the accepted science of the time, described in vivid detail the life of the alpha wolf and its constant struggle for dominance. The book launched his career, but it would also come to be his greatest regret. Because David Meck didn't just study wolves in captivity. He went on to become one of the world's leading experts on wild wolves. He spent decades, literally thousands of hours, tracking and observing them in their natural habitats, from the high Arctic of Ellesmere Island to the dense forests of Minnesota to the newly reintroduced packs of Yellowstone National Park. He lived with them. He learned their ways. And the more he watched them, the more he realized that what he was seeing in the wild looked nothing like what he and others had seen in zoos. There were no bloody battles for supremacy. There was no constant, ritualized dominance. The tense, violent hierarchy he had written about in his book simply wasn't there. What he saw instead was something much simpler and much more familiar. He saw families. The typical wild wolf pack, he discovered, is not a random assortment of ambitious rivals. It is a nuclear family unit. It consists of a breeding pair, the parents, and their offspring from the last 1, 2, or even 3 years. That's it. The alpha male and alpha female who lead the pack are quite simply mom and dad. The other wolves in the pack aren't betas or omegas vying for a promotion. They're the kids. They follow their parents' lead not because they've been violently subjugated, but because the parents have the life experience. They know where to find food, how to avoid danger, and how to raise a family. This realization turned the old theory on its head. The dominance displays that researchers had interpreted as acts of aggression were, in the wild, simply acts of parenting. When a parent wolf disciplines an unruly pup, it looks a lot like a dominance ritual. But it's no different than a human parent setting boundaries for a child. The submissive gestures of the younger wolves weren't displays of fearful surrender to a tyrant. They were expressions of respect and deference to their parents, the leaders of the family. The entire social structure was based not on conflict, but on cooperation and kinship. David Mech realized the scientific community had made a huge mistake, and he felt a profound responsibility to correct it, especially since his own book had done so much to popularize the flawed idea. He began writing articles and giving lectures, explaining the new understanding of wolfpack dynamics. He even tried to get his publisher to stop printing his famous 1970 book, but it was too popular. To this day, he maintains a page on his website with a simple, direct plea. The term alpha, he writes, is incorrect when describing the leader of a wolf pack. He now refers to the pack leaders as the breeding male and breeding female, or more simply, the parents. He has spent the better part of his career trying to put the genie he helped let out of the bottle back in. So let's paint a new picture. Forget the snowy battlefield. Instead, picture a home. The pack is led by the two animals who started it all, the mother and father. In the spring, a new litter of pups is born. They are the center of the pack's universe. The older siblings, now adolescents and young adults, help care for them. They bring food back to the den, they play with the pups, they act as babysitters while the parents are out hunting. They are learning the skills they will one day need to start families of their own. There is a hierarchy, of course, just as there is in any family. Parents lead, children follow. Older siblings might have seniority over younger ones, but it's a fluid and affectionate structure, not a rigid and violent one. The so-called Omega Wolf, the downtrodden scapegoat of the captive pack myth, doesn't really exist in the wild. Sure, in any family there might be a runt, or a more playful, goofy individual who gets picked on by its siblings, but it's not a permanent, institutionalized role. It's just the familiar dynamic of brothers and sisters. What happens when one of the younger wolves grows up and wants to lead? In the old story, this is the moment of violent confrontation, the challenger rising to kill or depose the king. But in reality, something far less dramatic happens. The young adult wolf, usually between the age of 2 and 3, simply leaves home. It's called dispersal. They walk away from their birth family in search of a mate and a territory of their own. It's the wolf equivalent of a kid graduating college and moving out of their parents' basement. They don't fight their father for control of the house. They go out into the world to start a house of their own. When they find a mate and have their first litter of pups, they automatically become the alphas of their new pack. They didn't win the title in a fight. They earned it by becoming parents. This is the real story of the wolf. It's a story about family, about cooperation, and about nurturing the next generation. So why has the half-truth of the aggressive, dominant alpha been so persistent even after the science has moved on? Part of it is simple inertia. Once an idea gets lodged in the popular imagination, it's incredibly difficult to dislodge. The image of the alpha wolf is just too cool, too cinematic. It's a much more exciting story than the tale of a hard-working wolf couple raising their kids. But there's a deeper reason. The myth of the alpha wolf resonates because it justifies a certain worldview. It provides a natural precedent for a competitive, hierarchical, dog-eat-dog vision of human society. If nature itself is a brutal battle for dominance, then perhaps the aggressive CEO, the ruthless politician, or the domineering social figure is simply acting out a biological imperative. The alpha myth gives a kind of moral permission slip for certain types of behavior. It whispers that being kind, cooperative, and empathetic is a sign of weakness, that to succeed, you must be the alpha. The truth about wolves challenges this profoundly. It suggests that in one of the planet's most resilient and successful predators, the key to survival is not internal conflict, but social cohesion. The strength of the wolf pack doesn't come from the singular power of a tyrannical leader, but from the combined efforts of a loving family working together. It's a story about interdependence, not just independence. It shows that leadership can be rooted in experience and care, not just strength and aggression. So we started our journey with a familiar image, the lone, dominant alpha wolf, a king ruling through fear and violence. It's a simple, powerful story that has shaped our understanding of both nature and ourselves. We followed that story back to its source, to a small enclosure in Switzerland, and discovered it wasn't a story about wolves in the wild, but a story about how any creature, human or animal, might behave when trapped in a stressful, unnatural environment. A story of prisoners, not a story of families. Then we journeyed into the wild with the very scientist who once championed the myth, and we watched as he uncovered the truth. The truth that a wolf pack is a family, plain and simple, led by parents, populated by their children, and held together by bonds of affection and cooperation, not by fear. Correcting this half-truth matters. It matters because the myth of the alpha wolf has been used to naturalize and justify harmful social hierarchies and toxic behavior in our own species. It gives a false impression of the natural world as a place of relentless, brutal competition, when so much of it is actually defined by incredible cooperation. The real story of the wolf doesn't give us a simple archetype for a boardroom brawler. It gives us a far more nuanced and, frankly, more inspiring model of leadership, one based on responsibility, care, and the deep instinctual drive to provide for your family and guide them safely through a dangerous world. Perhaps we see in nature not what is there, but what we expect to see. And in the story of the wolf, we found a perfect mirror for our own anxieties about power and status. But the real wolf reminds us that leadership isn't always about the struggle to be at the top of the pyramid. Sometimes it's simply about being a parent. Now you know the real story. What other half-truths are still out there? If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a comment, and join us next time. Until then, stay curious.